This week on Who Deserves to be Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we look at the case for putting Rick Rubin into the Hall of Fame as a non-performer. Normally, I look at the case for putting a performer into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This week, I'm going to make the case for putting a non-performer into the Hall because, to me, it's a complete travesty that he's not in already. One of the biggest snubs from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame voters is to not have super producer extraordinaire Long Beach, New York's own Rick Rubin in the Hall. Now, we would normally look at an artist chart action. However, Rick's a producer, so the chart action is non-existent. We're still going to hit some stats, though. So, with all of that said, to the tail of the tape we go. Rick Rubin co-founded the record label that brought hip-hop to the masses, Def Jam, along with Russell Simmons, who's also not in the Hall, probably for other reasons that we're not going to get into right now. Anywho, Rick is so much more than the guy who helped to make hip-hop great, though. He's also one of the most influential producers of the past 40 years. He's been nominated for 21 Grammy Awards, winning 8 of them, including Album of the Year twice, once with Adele, once with the Dixie Chicks, now known, of course, as the Chicks. He's been nominated for Producer of the Year at the Grammys 5 times, winning twice. At this point, I would normally give you an artist's influence to make their case, but for Rick, I'm just going to give you a list of the artists who he's either produced or executive produced. And this is going to take a very big breath. Here we go. LL Cool J, the Beastie Boys, Run DMC, Slayer, Public Enemy, The Cult, the Less Than Zero soundtrack, which was a great soundtrack, had the Bangles cover of Simon and Garfunkel's Hazy Shade of Winter that became a huge hit. Danzig, Andrew Dice Clay, the Black Crowes, the Ghetto Boys, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Johnny Cash, Sir Mix-a-Lot, Tom Petty, Lords of Acid, Nine Inch Nails, AC/DC, Donovan, System of a Down, Sheryl Crow, Melanie C., Rage Against the Machine, Eagle Eye Cherry, Macy Gray, Aerosmith, Audioslave, Limp Bizkit, Jay-Z, Slipknot, Lil Jon and the East Side Boys, Weezer, Shakira, the Dixie Chicks, the aforementioned Dixie Chicks, now known, of course, as the Chicks, Justin Timberlake, U2, Linkin Park, Poison, Vanessa Carlton, Neil Diamond, Jacob Dylan, Metallica, Pete Yorn, Brandy Carlisle, Typo Negative, Josh Groban, Kid Rock, Adele, ZZ Top, Lana Del Rey, Black Sabbath, Kanye, Eminem, Lady Gaga, Ed Sheeran, the Wu-Tang Clan, James Blake, Billy Corgan, and the Smashing Pumpkins. And that's just a partial list. Seriously, what more do you need to know? Now, there has been an argument made that since Rick worked with artists who are not part of the rock and roll genre, then he shouldn't be considered. Say what you will about whether hip-hop, R&B, and country belong in, the fact that he worked with Slayer, Rage Against the Machine, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Tom Petty, Metallica, ZZ Top, and the Smashing Pumpkins alone should warrant him getting inducted. After all, there are producers who have worked with far less artists in rock and roll who are in. Plus, Rick brought all of his knowledge from working in other genres and made his work with rock and metal artists even better. Rick is not eligible as a performer, but he can still get in one of the other committees. Phil Spector's in as a producer, so it's possible for Rick to get in. Therefore, Rick Rubin should finally not be one of the biggest snubs of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He should finally be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a non-performer. And that is it for Who Deserves to be Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We also invite you to check out our other podcast, the Music History Today podcast, where we go over what happened on that date in music history. That podcast drops daily, including weekends, on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. We also have the Music History In-Depth podcast, where we go more in-depth into the events that happened for that week in music history. And that podcast posts every Tuesday on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. Thank you very, very much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube or Spotify.